I'm Ashton Addison from BlockWest Capital for InvestmentPitch Media and the Crypto Coin Show. And today on Blockchain Interviews with Anthony Georgiades, co-founder and COO of Pastel Network. Anthony, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Awesome. I'm excited to chat more about Pastel.
Likewise, I'm excited to dive into Pastel Network. I would love for you to start us off with just a high-level overview and the focus of Pastel Network, and then we can dive into the details.
Absolutely. So just, in a nutshell, Pastel is, really one of the world's first, fully dedicated, purpose-built blockchains for the sole use case of NFTs. So obviously, just to kind of take a step back here, we launched Pastel back in 2018 before NFTs were hitting kind of mainstream media. And the general thesis at the time was, you had some applications like Rare Pepe, you had CryptoKitties, which had just obviously started to peak. And there were a lot of prevalent problems with the underlying use case of NFTs on more general purpose-built blockchains like Ethereum. So our thesis at the time was to really set out and build a piece of infrastructure and technology from the ground up for the sole use case of the NFT application itself. So we actually started off with a Bitcoin-like blockchain that uses kind of a ticketing metadata system versus the general smart contracting structure that's prevalent in most NFT platforms to date. And then basically, layered in a number of different features. And, altogether what this supports is, a highly robust, sophisticated system that's, scalable, ensures, very low transaction fees and registration fees, into perpetuity, and then allows for very custom features such as, a near duplicate detection that, demonstrates the authenticity and rareness of the underlying NFT itself. And so, from there, we've basically, set down a path to, launch and deploy a number of different tools and features that different players in the ecosystem can build upon, as well as, searching for interoperability across different, obviously, layer one solutions as well. And then, lastly, launching our own dedicated marketplace that lives directly on top of the Pastel network.
Very cool. Thanks for that overview, Anthony. And yeah, it's compared 2018 compared to now, it's exploded. And I think having that technology in place is really going to help. It seems that before the majority of NFTs being developed on Ethereum, there were quite a few problems, and it still seems that there are a few in the industry. And I'm guessing that you really pinpointed those down as you continue to develop out the technology. Can you talk about, from an artist or a creator's perspective, they're coming to mint their first NFTs and they see all of these different marketplaces and different blockchains, and what would you say to them for, what's the main competitive advantages of minting and utilizing NFTs on Pastel Network?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, right, if you're leveraging kind of the Pastel marketplace, again, that lives on the Pastel network, we've designed it from basically the perspective of the underlying user itself. A lot of applications on the market were obviously built, by crypto users for crypto users, but don't necessarily tailor towards, traditional digital artists or creators, generally speaking. So for us, having a very nice, user interface and experience that kind of abstracts away some of the, Wild West aspects of the crypto world was very critical for us. I'm just making it super seamless, super intuitive and simple. And then in terms of kind of the actual core features itself, first and foremost, right, a lot of times, you're minting an NFT on a dedicated, let's say an Ethereum platform per se, right? I have to get in line in terms of the underlying traffic and usage of, hundreds of different applications, or even just, other minting, creators of NFTs, right? That lends itself to very high transaction fees, scalability constraints and whatnot. On the Pastel platform, you're insured always, very negligible, low transaction fees. We've established a very kind of robust system that dynamically changes the registration fee in terms of PSL during periods of high traffic or network difficulty, which ensures that from a creator's perspective, what that means, you're always going to pay under 50 cents for anything that you mint. A couple other things mentioned too. I think what's become very critical and important from a creator's perspective is this concept of where is my actual asset or art being whatever it might be being stored, right? We've seen obviously some of the rug pull scams and things like that. When I acquire a traditional smart contract based NFT, I basically, have the underlying token ID and, potentially a hyperlink to, where the actual data is stored. And that can be on a kind of central web server, such as a, Google Cloud server or, some sort of AWS EC2 instance, right? I don't necessarily own the actual data itself as much as I actually do, the nifty, perspective of it. There's also a lot of players that are looking to solve upon this through IPFS pinning and things of the nature, but the issue with that is you also now rely on external dependencies and different node holders that need to basically maintain those IPFS nodes. So for us, what was really important was to actually build an internal storage solution. So anytime basically an NFT is uploaded onto the platform, we use a sophisticated fountain block algorithm that takes the file, and you can think about it as like chopping it up into thousands of different little blocks, and then it copies those blocks and then distributes them using an algorithm called Kademlia over every single node on the network. So the actual intrinsic storage of the data is internally on the blockchain itself.
Very cool. I like that. And you mentioned there 50 cents. That's pretty good for having democratized access to create NFTs, and you're not paying a bunch of of unknown amount depending on the network. And how many things are going on Ethereum specifically. But it also seems that a lot of these networks are utilizing layer 2 solutions to remove those costs, and therefore, potentially having under 50 cents as well. So I guess using Pastel, is it similar to when creators are utilizing layer 2 networks, or is it better and different?
Absolutely. Layer 2 networks in the sense of basically layer 1 solutions to help kind of ensure, lower fees per se.
Mm-hmm.
Look, it's definitely exciting to see a lot of the solutions that have come into the market today, right? And I think, that's just kind of one aspect of it as well. But, from our perspective, you start to layer in a lot of these different kind of, either kind of side chains or, relayer solutions to help kind of bandage some of the intrinsic problems. In our system itself, you don't necessarily see the trade-off, right? I might necessarily use a layer 2 network to ensure lower transaction fees, but that might mean that I'm waiting, X blocks before my NFT is minted, right? So, with some of that trade-off comes, other intrinsic issues itself, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
But, it's definitely encouraging to see, all of the, mind share and development power in the space that's, dedicating time and resources to solving upon a lot of these solutions.
Definitely. And speaking of development, I was looking into the development ecosystem for Pastel Network and the NFT dApp that you've really encouraged developers to be able to develop easily on Pastel. Maybe you can talk about the development ecosystem and the NFT dApp.
Yeah, absolutely. I cut off the last part. What was the last part of the question?
The NFT dApp and just the development ecosystem altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of Pastel specifically, what's exciting is, and as I mentioned, we've been working the last 3 years on a number of these underlying features, right? So, for example, our robust duplicate detection system can serve and stand like on an isolated basis, right? So you can imagine somebody that's running a layer 2 marketplace on top of an Ethereum or Solana can basically, upon minting an NFT, a simple, RPC call or, a simple kind of connection to Pastel enables them to leverage just one of our tools, like, for example, the new duplicate detection system. And, you've now basically, seen a lot of integration in terms of, actual, third-party developers, building on top of Pastel in interesting ways. So from our perspective, it's all about, how can we be as basically, open as possible, right? Mm-hmm. We built a lot of this awesome, really cool stuff. And, what can we do best to basically, leverage our resources and kind of open it up to the broader community. And so from our perspective, what the future looks like is, you have obviously a number of different NFT applications, that coexist in the world, right? And, potentially certain marketplaces, leverage, the duplicate detection system of Pastel. Maybe some leverage the actual, storage solutions that we have offered. And maybe you have actual layer 2 marketplaces that transition directly on top of the core underlying layer 1 infrastructure that we've built out. But at the end of the day, what's exciting is, we have, basically at this point, we've had hundreds of developers contribute to our overall code base. And we have 50 plus that are working actively on a daily basis, and basically just contributing code from a core perspective with, again, several hundred others that have basically maintained active repositories in our GitHub itself. So I think the future is very exciting, and I think as we continue to go to market and get more and more players and partners working with us and building upon us, it'll just obviously have significant network effects of development mindshare on top of us, that will then lend itself to more and more partners building with us.
I completely agree, and I do think that the duplicate protection is really interesting. And I'm curious if you have more information surrounding how big of a problem is duplicate protection, and when you and your team set out building this dApp, what was the main goal? Is it to protect creators, to check if somebody else is duplicating their NFTs, or is it to stop in the process if somebody else is trying to mint something and it's already been minted? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, right? The biggest issue that's really been prevalent in the digital art space for forever is really, how do I know that what I'm actually buying is, truly rare and authentic? And how easy is it to basically just, rip off something from, the internet and basically copy it? If I take a, let's say that Ashton decides to mint an NFT. I take that same NFT, I change one little pixel, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same data, but it's going to demonstrate a different perceptual hash, right? So it appears that it's different. So our whole objective was, how can we really create a system that from a viewer's basically naked eye looks, feels, is the same effectively. An NFT that's basically cropped, flipped, stretched, the contour component of it, a Mona Lisa with a mustache, right? Something that's not necessarily, truly rare, right? But is obviously, a unique perceptual hash. Mm-hmm. But so that whole kind of general idea, started off several years ago, and our CEO basically spent, a long time trying to basically solve upon this research problem. And I kind of view it as what I would say probably the biggest differentiating factor of the system itself. The fact that we've been able to actually achieve this, near duplicate detection component. And so you can think about it, as if I'm an artist and I mint an NFT and I know it's purely mine, I'll get assigned kind of a level of rareness. And from, your perspective as a user, it's anything from 0 to 100%. 100% meaning, this is extremely rare versus, 0%. This is, not rare whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And just for a quick rundown of how we do this, we basically use, a number of different deep learning models to transform each actual NFT into a, you can think about like a 10,000 plus vector fingerprint. And then we basically use sophisticated statistical techniques to assess the correlation of that fingerprint against every single NFT on Pastel, as well as, collaborative platforms, and then as well as doing, an effective reverse image search on the network. So we're basically, comparing this fingerprint to any other fingerprint that, the world has effectively seen. So it's a pretty powerful system. And, you can think about it like this, right? If I'm buying a CryptoPunk, and, I'm basically a new novel user, and it's, been altered slightly, I don't necessarily care, how authentic or rare it is, but, maybe that means I'm not necessarily willing to pay a high premium. Mm-hmm. And if I'm a, highly sophisticated collector, maybe every piece that I want to acquire, I want it to be, truly rare, truly authentic. I guess the last thing I would touch on here is, again, the important aspect of this is to really protect both, the user and creator from, outright scam, copyright infringement, etc. But at the end of the day, too, we've built in a level of kind of, ticketing submissions where, it helps ensure that obviously, the user is protected in the case of, false positives or false negatives and things of the nature.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks for elaborating on that, Anthony. I really appreciate that. And I'm also curious about, in the NFT space, there's been a lot of discussion and potential controversy around the environmental impacts and that minting NFTs are bad. I'm curious on your perspective on that. Is that a real issue? And if it is your team doing something to mitigate that?
I mean, look, there's been obviously, a lot of headlines in the news recently just with respect to the environmental impact of, just the broader blockchain ecosystem. Obviously, the debate over proof of work versus proof of stake, the extraneous, computational resources that may or may not be needed, definitely have kind of a detrimental impact on society itself. There's obviously, certain trade-offs as well with a proof of stake versus, proof of work system. The latter being obviously a lot more, battle tested. I would say though, for the most part, what is exciting is I think that for the first time in the industry's history, we've seen so much work going on into basically combating a lot of this, ESG concern, which I think is super, super, powerful and, from my perspective, very optimistic, right, in terms of, where things are going in the future. In terms of Pastel specifically, we've been, working actively with a number of those different groups, but we've also layered in a kind of unique aspect of the system where we basically take a component of every registration fee and actually send it to a nonprofit that plants trees to help basically, provide some carbon offsetting. So, I definitely think there's a lot of creative ways to help in terms of just, purely carbon offsets. This is kind of, one of the ways we've thought about it. But it is exciting to see, how much work is going into help find more sustainable long-term solutions.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's good to know. And it's always nice to hear when there's a company planting trees as well. So thanks for that. Now, moving forward, you already have all this intricate technology with Pastel. I'm guessing people are going and minting NFTs very often. What are the next steps for your team in terms of developments and releases and growing the platform, say, in the next 6 months?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's pretty exciting, right? We're at an inflection point where, we have our full mainnet is fully functional and live in terms of the actual layer one component itself. In the coming weeks, we're going to be launching our dedicated layer 2 marketplace directly on top of Pastel. So, from that perspective, there'll be a lot of, kind of user acquisition strategy in place in terms of actually going out to the market, acquiring initial users. And I think one aspect of what we're going to really focus on is, non-crypto native users, ones that maybe haven't even actually explored the NFT environment per se yet, because they've either, not had the resources to do so or have basically just been kind of, scared to make that jump into the crypto space. So, that's one aspect of, what we're really excited about on the roadmap. The second is just to continue to build out developer documentation in terms of, all of these amazing kind of tools that we have, built out in our broader ecosystem. And then, obviously from that perspective, procuring more and more partners to work with us, leverage our tools, build upon us. I wouldn't say that we have any competitor, right? I view everyone as a collaborator, right? It's still very early innings. Everything that we do is, for basically, the progress of just the broader ecosystem, right? And contributing to that growth. So working with a number of these different collaborators on, kind of a daily basis and, obviously contributing to that, vision and goal. And so, yeah, I think those, really are kind of the two main things we're focused on. Obviously a number of, underlying kind of specific features. If you go to pastel.wiki, you can see our full roadmap in terms of, what we have laid out over the coming months and, for every single release.
Great. I think that's a great perspective to have, as we are very early days and there's a lot of work to be done. So thank you for that, Anthony. For the viewers that are looking to learn more about Pastel Network in general and to start minting NFTs and getting involved and looking for the release for this marketplace, what's the best way for them to get involved and join the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to our website, pastel.network, basically we have a number of, different resources on the website directly. You can go to the About Us page, read the overview. And I think, obviously go to the wiki as well for a little bit more of a technical overview on the platform. And then, once you're on the site, we have links to, our Telegram, our Twitter, our Instagram accounts. And, if you join any of those different community channels, we're constantly posting, different updates and different news on the platform in terms of, our progress and next steps.
Great. Thanks, Anthony. I will leave those links in the description box below as well. All the best with Pastel Network moving forward, and let's follow up in the near future.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Ashton. Appreciate it.